How to create attraction without talking too much. Most people think attraction is built through talking, saying the right things, keeping conversations going, always having something to add. They believe that the more they speak, the more interesting they become. But in reality, talking too much often does the opposite. Because attraction is not built through constant expression. It's built through presence, through energy, through how you make someone feel, even in moments of silence. Have you ever been around someone who doesn't say much, but still stands out? Someone who speaks less, but when they do, people listen. There's something about that kind of person. They feel calm. They feel confident. They feel in control. And without realizing it, you're drawn to them. That's what this is about. Because learning how to create attraction without talking too much is not about being silent. It's about saying less and meaning more. 1. Why talking too much reduces attraction. When you talk too much, you remove space. And space is essential for attraction because space allows the other person to think, to wonder, to feel. Here's a simple real-life scenario. You're having conversation with her. She says something. Instead of responding simply, you go on. You explain more. You add extra details. You keep talking to avoid silence. At first, it feels like you're contributing. But over time, it becomes overwhelming because there is no pause, no breathing room, no moment for her to engage. And when someone doesn't get the chance to engage, they disconnect. 2. The power of presence. Attraction is not just about words. It's about how you carry yourself, how you respond, how comfortable you are, even when nothing is being said. Here's an example. You're sitting with her. There's a moment of silence. Most people rush to fill it. They say something just to avoid the pause. But someone with presence stays calm. They don't rush. They don't feel pressured. They allow the moment to exist. And that calmness creates a different kind of energy because it shows confidence. It shows that you are comfortable without needing constant validation. 3. Let her invest in the conversation. Attraction grows when both people participate, not when one person does everything. Here's a scenario. You're asking questions. She answers. Instead of letting her engage further, you immediately ask another question, then another, then another. Now the interaction feels like an interview. There's no space for her to invest. Now imagine this instead. You ask something. She answers. You respond simply. And then you pause. Now she has space. She can ask something back. She can continue the topic. She becomes part of the interaction. And that participation builds attraction. 4. Say less. Create more impact. The less you say, the more weight your words carry. Because when you speak all the time, your words blend together. They lose distinction. But when you speak selectively, people pay attention. Here's a real-life example. You're in a group setting. Most people are talking constantly, trying to be heard. Now imagine you speak less. You listen more. And when you do speak, you say something clear and direct. People notice because it stands out. The same applies in one-on-one interaction. When your words are not constant, they become meaningful. 5. Stop over-explaining. Over-explaining is one of the biggest signs of trying too hard. You feel the need to clarify everything, to make sure you're understood, to avoid being misinterpreted. But attraction doesn't grow through explanation. It grows through feeling. Here's a scenario. She asks you something simple. Instead of answering directly, you give a long explanation. You add details that weren't necessary. You try to make it perfect. But what it does is reduce the natural flow. Simple communication feels confident. Over-explaining feels uncertain. 6. Texting. Keep it short and natural. This applies even more in texting. Because in texting, long messages can feel heavy. Here's a real-life situation. She sends a short message. Instead of matching that energy, you send a long paragraph. Now the balance is off. It feels like you're doing more. Instead, keep it simple. Match the tone. Match the energy. Let the conversation breathe. Another example. You send a message. Instead of sending multiple follow-ups, you wait. You allow space. Because texting is not about constant communication. It's about meaningful interaction. 7. Silence is not your enemy. Silence makes most people uncomfortable. They feel like something is wrong. They feel like they need to fix it. But silence is part of connection. Here's a real-life moment. You're on a date. There's a pause in the conversation. Most people panic internally. They start searching for something to say. But someone with confidence stays relaxed. They don't rush. They allow the silence to exist. And often, that silence creates a different kind of connection because it feels real, not forced. 8. Focus on how you make her feel. Attraction is not built on the amount of words you say. It's built on the experience someone has while interacting with you. And this is where most people get it wrong. They focus on content instead of focusing on impact. They think, what should I say next? How do I sound interesting? How do I keep the conversation going? But the better question is, how does she feel while talking to me? Because at the end of any interaction, people don't sit down and remember every sentence. They don't replay every word you said. What stays with them is the feeling. Did it feel easy? Did it feel natural? Did it feel enjoyable? Or did it feel forced, heavy, and like too much effort? Here's a real-life scenario. You're having a conversation with her. You're talking a lot. You're trying to be engaging. You're explaining things, telling stories, adding details. But while you're doing all of that, she's mostly listening, responding briefly, not fully engaged. Now, compare that to a different situation. You're talking less. You're listening more. You're reacting naturally to what she says. You're not rushing. You're not forcing anything. And now, she starts opening up more. She starts adding to the conversation. She becomes more involved. Why? Because the interaction feels lighter. It feels balanced. It doesn't feel like she's being talked at. It feels like she's part of something. And that difference matters. Because attraction grows in participation, not in one-sided effort. Another scenario. You're texting. You send long messages, detailed explanations. You try to make everything clear. But the conversation starts to feel heavy. Now imagine this instead. You send something simple, something direct, something easy to respond to. Now she replies more. She engages more. She feels more comfortable. Because the interaction feels effortless. And effortlessness is attractive. Here's something important to understand. When you talk too much, you unintentionally take control of the interaction. You fill all the space. You guide every moment. You leave very little room for her to contribute. And when someone doesn't get the chance to contribute, they disconnect emotionally. Not because they don't like you, but because they're not part of the experience. Now let's go deeper. Attraction is emotional. It's not logical. You can say all the right things. But if the interaction feels tense or forced, it won't create connection. At the same time, you can say very little. But if the interaction feels relaxed and enjoyable, it builds naturally. That's why presence matters more than performance. Because presence affects how someone feels in real time. Here's a simple but powerful shift. Instead of trying to impress her with words, focus on making the interaction feel good. Slow down your responses. Listen fully before speaking. Respond instead of reacting. Allow pauses. Allow moments where nothing is said. Because those moments are not empty. They give space for emotion to build. They give space for comfort to develop. They give space for connection to deepen. Another real-life moment. You're sitting together. There's a pause. Most people panic internally. They think, I need to say something. This is awkward. I have to fix this. So they start talking, filling the silence. But someone who understands this does something different. They stay calm. They stay present. They don't rush to fill the gap. And that calmness changes the entire dynamic. Because now the silence doesn't feel awkward. It feels natural. It feels comfortable. And comfort is one of the strongest foundations of attraction. Because when someone feels comfortable around you, they lower their guard. They become more open. They engage more naturally. And that's where real connection begins. So instead of asking yourself, how do I say more? Start asking, how do I create a better experience? Because that one shift changes everything. You stop performing. You stop overthinking. You stop trying to control every moment. And you start allowing the interaction to flow. Naturally, effortlessly. And when something feels effortless, people are drawn to it. They want more of it. They come back to it. Not because they were convinced, but because it felt right. And that is what truly creates attraction. At the end of the day, creating attraction without talking too much is not about silence. It's about control. Control over your words. Control over your timing. Control over your need to fill every moment. Because most people talk not because they have something to say, but because they feel uncomfortable with space. They feel like silence means something is wrong. They feel like they need to keep the interaction alive. But when you understand this, you move differently. You stop speaking just to fill gaps. You stop explaining everything. You stop trying to impress through volume. And instead, you become intentional. You say what matters. You allow pauses. You give space for interaction to grow. And that changes how you are perceived. Because now, your presence feels calm. Your communication feels effortless. Your energy feels balanced. You're no longer trying to prove anything. You're simply expressing yourself. And that authenticity is what creates real attraction. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation, notice your pattern. Are you talking because you have something meaningful to say, or because you're trying to avoid silence? That awareness is everything. Because once you recognize it, you can change it. You can slow down. You can choose your words. You can allow moments to exist without filling them. And when you do that, something powerful happens. People start leaning into the conversation. They start engaging more. They start feeling more. Because now, there is space. Space for curiosity. Space for connection. Space for attraction to grow. And that is how you create attraction without needing to say too much.